The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
I gotta admit it, okay? I regret a couple things in my life. My first girlfriend and the Lindholm trade. Because think about it. That's probably the biggest midseason Canucks trade in Canucks history. What?
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, happy hump day, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks, and also a Canucks writer currently with the Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into today's episode, we got to thank you for tuning into Locked On Canucks. You know why? Because it is your Canucks every damn day. Part of that Locked On Podcast Network. They're doing the most for sports fans across the world and for our show. If you haven't done so already, what are you waiting for? Make sure you go subscribe, like, follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And, you know, Kyle and I, we ain't here on Locked On without the sponsors, okay? And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day. How summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's no secret. The Canucks gave up an absolute haul to get Elias Lindholm. In retrospective, was it worth it? That's what we want to dive into here early on this episode of Locked On Canucks. And I've kind of prepped what the Canucks might look like if they did keep Lindholm and Zadorov versus some of the other moves they made in free agency. So we'll get into that. We might talk a bit about Jim Rutherford's comments on the trade as well. He was on a recent podcast. We'll talk a bit about Sprong versus Kuzmenko and try to get to some of your comments as well. Before we do all of that, let me introduce my co-host, Buddy Boy. Just rolled out of bed, but you're still here. I'm proud of you, man. Kyle Bowen. How's it going, brother?
Buddy Boy Bowen. Bro, I'm playing a lot of PlayStation 2 these days, okay? And editing podcasts and living the dream. I'm tired right now, man. I'm tired. I'm also tired of looking back and over-evaluating this Lindholm trade from back in January, February, straight up, because the last time I checked, and this is just going through my time as a Canucks fan, right? I feel as if that was the biggest midseason trade the Canucks ever made. Again, I started watching hockey in 01, 02, and again, the Canucks bought the big fish at the deadline. Well, one of them, and it wasn't the deadline, but you know what I'm saying? A first, another draft pick, a prospect, Kuzmenko, for a couple months of Lindholm. And man, oh man, I mean, I'm not going to say it sucks that he's not here, but it was really interesting to hear Jim Rutherford talk about how they tried to bring him back. They wanted to bring him back. And because they didn't, they were able to do some other things. They were able to keep some other guys, all that jazz. So a lot of things could look completely different if, again, Lindholm, who was a lot better than Elias Pettersson, stuck around because of, I don't know, his fascination for the city of Vancouver, his love for the playoffs, this core, this belief, the Canucks are on the rise. And speaking of which, it wasn't that long ago, right? When the Canucks got eliminated, there was rumors that players on this team were quote unquote begging management to keep Lindholm. Okay. And it wasn't too long ago when Frank Saravelli reported that Lindholm not signing with the Canucks made the Oilers, an Oilers team led by Stan Bowman now, they made the Oilers cheer. They celebrated, okay? They were happy that Lindholm was no longer in the division, and that's the team that went to the Stanley Cup final. That's the crop of the West. So, bro, it's like the Lindholm era was really, really short, but, bro, come on. I got to think about it a little because this is year one of a team opening up the window, and they went all in to get Lindholm here, and he's not here anymore.
Yeah, there just isn't too many instances in Canucks history where the Canucks have paid this much for a rental. And yeah they've had some big trades before. I specifically think about kind of the Pat Quinn years way back in the early 90s where he made some, for the most part, what were good deals that helped that team reach a Stanley Cup final. But for the most part, yeah, we just haven't seen this in recent history where the Canucks traded, you know, a guy in Kuzmenko who had almost 40 goals the season before, a first-round pick, a third-round pick who probably should have been a first-round pick. You know, it was an absolute haul the Canucks gave up for Lindholm. And should they regret it? Ooh, I'm going to say a little bit. But here's a catch-22, right? Like, I think every team who doesn't win the Stanley Cup and who buys a rental at the deadline regrets it. Like, I think the Winnipeg Jets probably regret paying a couple draft picks for Tyler Toffoli because they played 5 playoff games before they were eliminated.
And Sean Monahan.
Yeah, and Sean Monahan too. And what about Jake Gensel in Carolina, right? Like, they didn't give up quality necessarily, but they gave up quantity, a couple draft picks, roster player and Bunting, a few good prospects. They didn't get past the second round, much like the Vancouver Canucks. Do they regret that trade? Probably, to an extent. But here's the thing that's specific to the Vancouver Canucks that doesn't really apply to a team like Carolina. This Canucks team needed the playoff experience, right? They needed to win at least a round to show the guys in the locker room who hadn't experienced the playoffs, which, by the way, was half the team, what the playoffs are all about. And Lindholm really helped with that, especially at a time where Elias Pettersson, as we know, as we've talked about ad nauseum, was not at his best. So, of course, there's some regret with this trade. But when I see what this franchise has done after the fact, I don't think they should be losing any sleep over it.
Yeah, you know what? This franchise won't lose any sleep over it only because this franchise is led by real mother effers, Mother effers that don't lose sleep on things that happened in the past, especially when your core includes Demko, Pettersson, Hughes, Miller, Besser, etc., right? They've moved on, and they've done a great job. Like, it's interesting to say that Lindholm and Zadorov are gone, and more notably Lindholm, yet I'm more confident in this forward unit. Now, I'm also more confident in this forward unit based on, again, all these new acquisitions, but mainly because I feel as if the Canucks, they had to play a different way of hockey to get ready for the playoffs. That being said, man, oh man, it's hard for me not to believe that this team was playing their best hockey without Lindholm. And Blueger, like the whole Lindholm experience not working on Pettersson's line and then him having to replace Blueger as a third line center because of the injury to Joshua, just like things just never seemed right. Now, again, we're a rugged team. We're a big team. We're an annoying team to play against, but we also got really good goaltending, whether it came from Shelovs or Demko. And man, oh man, it was time in and time out. The Canucks were getting outshot and outshot and outshot again. And one of the first things that Tocchet said after this team lost, right? He's been referring to how he needs to open it up, how he needs to play more offensive. Well, before they got Lindholm, they were doing just that. So is that another reason why they might regret this Lindholm trade? Maybe. I mean, here's the answer, right? The only way they don't regret this trade is if the Canucks continue to progress, right? Like, I'm not saying, how I said that the Canucks had to win a round last year because they got Lindholm? It's that or bust. Even I was saying stuff like it's cup or bust because when a team goes all in like that, when they trade a surplus of assets and talent for one guy for a rental, bro, it's like, what are you talking about? You're going for the Stanley Cup. You really are. Now, I know he's not here, but man, oh man, for this team not to regret it, they kind of have to add onto for sure what they did last year. So that's good. Getting to the second round, still a really young team when it comes to playoff experience, but possibly getting to the third round. Like, this Lindholm trade could linger if, again, the Canucks don't make strides.
Man, oh man, it's aside from one of our top-notch commenters, Bob Blueger, I don't know if anyone has a bigger boner for Teddy Blueger than you do, bro.
Bro, because he was playing swaggy. He was swaggy.
Lindholm, we got Teddy Blueger. That's what I heard.
Yeah, bro. Well, dude, like, again, I just, like, if you look at the film, and again, different brands of hockey, okay? Lindholm played really big in the playoffs. I'm talking big, strong. I saw a side to him that I didn't even know he had. And you can kind of see the resemblance of a complete player. Like, if he gets the offensive game back, bro, Lindholm's a threat. Lindholm's an SOB. You don't want to play against that guy. Okay, for real. You don't. And I think he had like 9 points in like 13 playoff games or whatever. But man, oh man. Again, his two-way ability was consistent and also really aggressive in the playoffs. It was good to see. But man, oh man. If I look at our third-line centers through this year, whether it be Suter, Blueger, or Lindholm, if I'm watching the film and looking at who did it the best, it was Teddy Blueger. It was Teddy Blueger. When he was on, he was really good.
Yeah, no, that's fair, man. I mean, honestly, I don't think Suter and Blueger are too different. I think just Suter got injured at a time where, with Joshua and Garland, those guys were really controlling possession earlier in the season, but just really weren't finishing. And then Blueger comes along and the guys start finishing, right? But both the lines were really dominating at even strength. So in the regular season, I think they're all a watch, but come playoff time, Lindholm was by far the superior player. But Kyle, we talked about it.
He was double. He was double the player. Like, Lindholm was triple the player of Blueger in the playoffs. That's very true.
Yeah, but again, like we talked about it before, every day is no. You got to be careful in terms of overpaying guys for what they did in the playoffs. And I think there's a real risk that Lindholm is kind of in a decline, right? And maybe he'll get some value on that contract over the first couple seasons, but I don't see him as a first-line center, which is what he is in Boston. And he would have been a top six winger or a third-line center on this team, so maybe the fit wasn't necessarily there. Now, Kyle, on the other side, here's what I want to do. I've drafted what the Canucks might have looked like if they kept Lindholm and Zadorov, what they might have given up. So let's look at that potential roster and talk about whether that Canucks roster would have been better if they just kept Lindholm and Zadorov. That's coming up on the other side after we showed it our friends over at FanDuel. You know what? I'm a sports guy, and I love sports. I love them so much, and I never want them to stop. But the playoffs, they gone, okay? We got fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel, they got my back, and they let me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. All right. So with FanDuel, make sure you head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. Again, you can bet on Major League Baseball. The Olympics are coming up. Whatever tickles your fancy. And hey, if you're having any gambling issues, make sure you go get some help, okay? Because, hey, that's the most important thing, right? Gamble responsibly, okay? Again, show is brought to you by FanDuel. They are the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
People, we back doing this, and that's talking about your Vancouver Canucks while I'm still in bed. Okay, I was playing PlayStation 2 till 1:30 last night, okay? And also doing some DJing at the Burnaby Gardens. Anyways, Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bowen, doing this because of the Locked On Podcast Network, right? Giving us that mantra, it's your team every day, no matter what, even in the summer. And also we're able to do this because of the Don't Doze Art Lab. They take care of that West Coast bias. One love to them. Speaking of that West Coast bias, yes, I am the biggest Teddy Bluger fan out there. I really am. Really am. It is what it is. It's just the truth. And again, I'm also a fan of doing things and taking shots and capitalizing on the moment. And acquiring Lindholm at that time, dude, I was jumping up and down. Because every single one of the Canucks players at that moment, like their top guys, were going. You know what I'm saying? We're like amongst the best players in hockey. That's why we had like 5 All-Stars before Lindholm got here. I was stoked. I knew that this team was actually gunning for the Stanley Cup. And if you look at this comment from Game Pass, these types of trades always suck in hindsight. You have to do these moves at the deadline if you want that one, that shot at the cup. And it makes sense. That being said, we don't have Lindholm, and we only had him for a couple months. But as Infamous is saying, do we beat Nashville without Lindholm? Probably not. Again, Demko goes down. Patterson has severe tendonitis chlorophopsis. You know what I'm saying? One of those things. Have you ever had that? So he was out too pretty much. And Lindholm kind of saves the day and does his thing and plays a big role. So yeah, playoff experience matters. The city was able to feed off that. Give Aquilini some juice. You know what I'm saying? And here we are again. In my opinion, en route easily to be a contender in the West. And maybe that's not a thing if Lindholm is not here.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So let's get into it, Kyle. Again, what would the
Canucks honestly, I think.
Sorry
to cut you off. I just had this came to mind again. If we don't beat Nashville, does Danton Heinen take a discount? Does Kiefer Sherwood come here? You know what I'm saying? Does DeBrus come here? Dude, Rutherford saying that players were chomping at the bit to come to Vancouver.
Yeah. Well, I think you make a great point, right? If they don't beat Nashville, it's a completely different story for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, this is a team that took Edmonton to Game 7. That was up 3-2 against Edmonton in the second round. I mean, it is a completely different narrative if they lost to the Nashville Predators. And we said that at the time, right? Everydayers, they would have heard that if they were listening back in April. But you lose to the Nashville Predators, who were, they put up a fight, but they were by far the inferior team. That would have been an absolute crushing loss. And I said it on the pod. I said I would have been crushed if they lost to the Nashville Predators. At least with Edmonton, they were the underdogs in that series more or less, even though they had more points in the regular season. So it would have been a different story.
Going 7 games against McDavid and Draisaitl and the Oilers, who again are the cream of the crop, led by Stan Bowman. Again, that is appealing. You know what I'm saying? like, oh damn, the Canucks actually. Oh, they did that without Demko. They did that without their third. With their third stringer. That's mad impressive. And yeah, players are wanting to come to Vancouver again. Anyways, let's get into your lines, okay? I love the comments today. This is a great conversation. But Trevor Beggs, man, get into your mock lines with Lindholm and Zadorov in the lineup because things look different.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm actually switching our background for those who are on YouTube to the Oilers losers logo because, they just hired Stan Bowman, who, obviously everyone knows the story of 2010 and the malpractice of the Blackhawks there. And what's with the Oilers and, signing Corey Perry, Evander Kane, and now Stan Bowman as the GM. I mean, the Oilers, you guys, you're a good hockey team, but you're also a loser organization.
I keep saying it, man. McDavid's like Tom Brady, man. Wants to be Tom Brady. He don't give a ish, bro. He don't. Like, this guy just will get, like, you know how, like, Tom Brady at the end of his career, and it kind of worked for him. He's like, yeah, sign Antonio Brown. I don't care. Yeah. I don't care if he's whipping out his D in public and being a fucking, being an idiot. Let's sign him and let's win a Super Bowl. And what do? They win Super Bowls, man.
Yeah,
hey, man, being a good person gets you to heaven.
Connor McDavid is Tom Brady without the rings. There you go, buddy. You heard it here first on Locked On Canucks. Okay, so here's a little brainstorm I did. I'm actually going to bring up a little graphic for those on YouTube, but I'll read through it as well. I basically did some math on, if the Canucks signed Zadorov at Lindholm at the contracts they signed, they would have been paying these guys, $12.75 million per season, right? So if you look at what they did in free agency, I basically took DeBrusk, Heinen, Myers, and Desharnais off the roster, right? Because that was exactly $12.75 million. And you could quibble with a couple players here and there, but basically the lines I came up with, if the Canucks don't sign DeBrusk, Heinen, Myers, and Desharnais, and they keep Zadorov and Lindholm, I had Lindholm, Petey, and Höglander, Sprong, Miller, Besser, Joshua, Bluger, Garland, Sherwood, Suter, and Podkolzin with PDG and Amon as your extra forwards. Then on defense, I have Hughes, Hronek, Soucy, Zadorov, Forbort, Juleson, and Friedman, okay? So, Kyle, we did the episode yesterday. Again, if you haven't seen it already, go check it out. Kyle and I gave out our lineup predictions for the season. Again, more so, what are the sexiest lines possible? And I'm thinking about that episode yesterday, and I'm looking at these Canuck lines, and I wonder, how different would this team have been if they just kept Zadorov and Lindholm? And my quick take on it here is that, look, Boston overpaid for both players. They overpaid for Lindholm. They overpaid for Zadorov. When I look at this Canucks team, the bigger regret for me, and I think most Canuck fans would agree, is letting Nikita Zadorov walk. And I know he wasn't worth that contract, but when I see this Canucks defense is currently constructed, a top four of Hughes, Hronek, Soucy, Zadorov is way different than a top four of Hughes, Hronek, Soucy, and Myers, in my opinion. Look, Zadorov's overpaid, but Myers is also overpaid. So, again, when I look at that potential lineup, it starts to make me regret that Zadorov missed a bit more in free agency. Am I going crazy there? Am I onto something? Or do you think I should just...
You're not going crazy, man. You're not going crazy, Trevor. And speaking of Trevor, I'm going to talk to the other Trevor on Friday. Kempner Canucks, the better Trevor on YouTube. If you don't know who he is, but you know who Trevor Beggs is, you're really doing your hockey experience wrong. For real. Kempner is like 8 times the man and 40 times the hockey reporter than Trevor Beggs is. But yeah, I'm gonna have him on the show on Friday, and I'm gonna ask him that because he's like the biggest Zadorov fan, and he's been right a couple times about some big things with the Canucks. And yeah, come on, man. We overpaid for Myers, we overpaid for Vincent Desharnais, and Zadorov, who wanted to come here, who wanted to stay here, got what I'm hearing the same contract offer from the Vancouver Canucks. That's what I'm hearing. But he chose Boston. You know why I think he chose Boston though? I think maybe it was because of a role. If the contract and the dollars were the same, I think he actually saw himself being a number 2 D-man in Boston as opposed to being a number 4 or 5 here. IMO. Or maybe the bridge was burnt. I don't know. Interesting stuff. But yeah, you know what? I will say this about Lindholm, though. Again, we're talking about the Boston Bruins, right? And they've been wrong a couple times with like player acquisition and like all that stuff, but they've also been right a million times. They're a world-class organization, like it or not. And yeah, they're desperate for a first-line center prior to July 1st, and they give a lot of money to Lindholm, but that desperation could also connect with getting a similar Lindholm that we saw in the playoffs. And if you have that guy, a guy that the Canucks no longer have anymore, like, dude, you're doing well. That guy's a good player. Like, that Lindholm is a really effective player. That Lindholm, like, who would I say he reminds me of? Just like, he's just an SOB, tough to play against, man. Like, he was playing big, he was playing mean, he was doing his thing. He was just getting started. So again, Boston could be getting one there for a couple years, not long term, but for a couple years. Hey, speaking of a couple years, man, SK93 though, he said something really important though, and this is like the new era of Canucks hockey and why we need to be patient and why you just got to trust management. And if you haven't already done so, go listen to Jim Rutherford talked about Bob McCown and John Shannon on their podcast yesterday. Okay, but look at this comment from SK93, and this is where I kind of have to just go to bed realizing that, yeah, we made one of the biggest trades in Canucks history for Lindholm, but it was only for a rental, and we didn't pay him a lot. Anyways, SK saying that this is the first time in over a decade that the Canucks don't actually have a bad contract on the team. Dropping Lindholm was the right move. So again, right now Lindholm is good, but that 8-year deal or whatever you sign, maybe 2 years from now, 5 years from now, or maybe like 3 years from now, it's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah. Shout out to SK93 again, one of the elite commenters here on Locked On Canucks. Again, let's look at the Canucks on the other side. In particular, I want to look at Sprong and Kuzmenko. We kind of teased that. So in terms of bad contracts, with the Kuzmenko one, a good one to get off of. And are there similarities between Sprong and Kuzmenko? We'll also get to some of your comments here on the other side on Locked On Canucks. No ad read from me, but I will say this, okay? We are looking for local sponsors here on Locked On Canucks. So if you're a local business and you want to have an ad read done by me, trust me, if you want to sponsor the show, you can make me your bitch. Okay.
Whoa. You missed the beat button, man.
Oh, my bad. Hey, I'm down to do it though.
Okay.
Again, local sponsors. We're looking for someone Locked On Canucks. If you or you know someone who owns a business and they're looking for some extra, some extra, I forgot the word.
Great sell job here. If you want to sponsor Locked On Canucks and be voiced by this beautiful voice right here and to help your product move on the streets, holler at us. Begsy, man, step up your ish, man.
Unbelievable. Locked On Canucks back on the other side.
Okay, we back doing this, and that's talking about your Vancouver Canucks and being horrible sales reps for Locked On Canucks. Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bowen, and Trevor, man, that was a horrible sale job. I'm trying to get that Christmas money lined up. Christmas is in like 2 months, but I don't think that's a surprising thing that you were bad at that because you're such a humble person. I could never see you ask for anything in your life for real. Like you're just not that type of guy. I've never heard you say, "Yo, Kyle, can you grab me a Coca-Cola from the gas station?" Oh, can you grab me some Gator? Like, you know what I'm saying, bro? Like, you're just never asking for anything. So I'm not surprised at your sales pitch.
Yeah, you know what? I forgot a word, man. I think that sleep deprivation's catching up to me. And
Yeah.
Look at you, man. I wish I was as good as you, surviving on like 2 hours of sleep, man. Unbelievable stuff.
Yeah, it's the Coca-Cola. Kyle Bowen, Trevor Beggs doing this, talking about, again, your Vancouver Canucks. Hit the like button, smash the subscribe button, and let's keep this party going, man. It's going to be a busy week here on Locked On Canucks, trying to get a couple of the fans on the show for the next 2 days to join Trevor and I. And if you want to do that, hit the link in the bio below. Join the Discord and talk to us. So, again, we can set up a little video chat for you to join the show. Anyways, you're doing what? You're doing what? Not talking more about this Jim Rutherford interview and talking about Daniel Sprong being the next Andrei Kuzmenko. Beggsy, was there anything that Rutherford said that you want to talk about? Because I am just, how do I say it, man? You know how my homie has a Jim Rutherford jersey? I want one too. That's what I'm saying. I'm so proud that we have a management group like this.
Yeah, honestly, Rutherford's comment that stood out to me the most was the fact that he kind of admitted that they wanted to keep Lindholm and Zadorov, but they knew there was a chance that they were leaving. But he said not signing them allowed them to do other things in free agency, and that's what kind of gave me the idea to look at what would the Canucks have looked like if they kept Lindholm and Zadorov versus what they did in free agency. And I like what they did. I think they have a ton of value signings, and I think that's the main thing. Going back to SK93's comment, the Canucks don't have a bad contract on their books. If they sign Lindholm and Zadorov to those contracts, those inevitably would have been bad contracts at some point. The DeBrusk one probably carries the most risk because it's long term. But again, he's 27 years old, and everything else they did, for the most part, looks good. I think Myers and Desharnais are the other ones that stand out to me. And it's like, would you rather have Zadorov or would you rather have Myers and Desharnais, right? Zadorov, Jules versus Myers and Desharnais. But again, those contracts have shorter term attached to them. So there's a trade-off either way.
Yeah, all in all, Rutherford and his ability to convey this feeling that this team is not satisfied, that they need to get a lot better, that they need to lean on guys like JT Miller, and guys like JT Miller need to continue to be accountable and just overall not be content, man. Not be content. Straight up. Because here's the thing, right? If that message is coming from the top and they're bringing all these guys in and they're letting people go and they're just being stern and firm on their beliefs and their systems, it's important for the players to lean on that, read that, and understand that the Canucks and Alvin and company, who made it clear that, again, the second round was not good enough. Like, while everyone was smiling after we got eliminated by the Oilers and just kind of looked back in retrospect and thought about the fun times we had, Patrick Alvin was a stone cold killer and said, yo, that wasn't good enough. That wasn't good enough. If the players realize that, a group of players that, again, just started playing good hockey 12 months ago or 10 months ago, then we're in for more success. If the Canucks get comfortable and feel as if they know what they're doing, they're in trouble. But at the same time, after me finishing that sentence, I realized that, again, Rick Tocchet, Rutherford, and Alvin, they're not going to let that happen. They're not going to let that happen. And another thing that they're not going to let happen is a guy like Daniel Sprong just coming in here and feeling as if he can continue to be like this one-way player and get away with it. We talk about this whole Podkolzin thing, and we're going to talk about it more tomorrow. Bro, if it's clear that Sprong does not want to commit to both sides of the game, just like they did with Kuzmenko, he's going to be out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And there are similarities between the two players, and you kind of looking at player card value. Kuzmenko, valued at $4.5 million according to the Athletic, Sprong at 2.8. So, but that makes sense because that kind of takes into account a couple of seasons as Kuzmenko again has hit heights in the NHL that Sprong has yet to hit. But there's similarities in their game, right? Both those guys aren't good in the back check. They're definitely elite offensive players who leave a lot to be desired defensively, but again, you got Sprong at $975,000. Kuzmenko's making $5.5 million. So there's a pretty big difference between the two players. Let's get a couple of comments before we get out of here. Bob Bluger, Teddy Bluger's biggest fan aside from Kyle Bowen, saying Thomas Duran's questioning if Teddy B can be an effective third line center for more than 35 games. I think that's cherry picking a bit because he was an effective third line center for 35 games last season, but he was elevated by Joshua and Garland. So I am curious how Teddy Bluger is going to perform. And he might not be the third line center. It could be Pius Suter, right? And actually one topic I might want to talk about here in the summer as we get into August is Dakota Joshua. Dakota Joshua actually played a little bit of center last season. Near 50.
Whoa.
Is there a chance Joshua could be a center on this team? That's an August idea. But
whoa.
Bluger and Thomas Durant, look, I think Teddy
What type
Bluger
of drugs are you doing, man?
That he can do it.
Damn, bro. Dakota Joshua as a center. And, bro, when Rutherford was talking about how not being able to keep Lindholm and Zadorov allowed them to do other things. Again, the Canucks made contract offers to both these guys. It made me realize that, man, Dakota Joshua must have actually been a third option or a fourth option for this team. Which, yeah, makes sense behind those guys. But at the same time, I feel like, and this is a crazy thing to say, there's still a lot of room for Dakota Joshua to improve. And I wonder if he can give you even more value than he did last year that could equate to what Lindholm's going to give Boston. I know they play different positions and whatnot, but is there a different version of Dakota Joshua? Is there not just a 35 to 40 point guy? Is there a 50 point guy? Bro, this guy's got tools, man. He really does. And, again, yesterday on the episode, we talked about, guessing the lines, who's going to play with who going into September and October. And what did Trevor Beggs do? He didn't reunite the best third line in hockey. What he did was put JT Miller with Dakota Joshua and Connor Garland. Yeah, it's interesting times, man. You know what? You know how I said that, for this core, for this system, for this organization to continue to take the next step and be competent and not be in their heads and still compete and still prove a lot of people wrong, have that attitude, they're going to need even better performances from a lot of these guys, because that's what happened last year, right? A lot of guys played above their contracts. Well, it's going to have to happen again. We always talk about, oh yeah, Dakota Joshua, we saved some money on him. He took a discount. Well, it's a discount if he plays above that value. So Yeah.
I think there's a good goddamn shot he gets there. Kyle, I think we should get out of here. And
Yep.
tomorrow's episode, like you said, we want to talk about Vasily Podschlagen. Is this his last stand in Vancouver? And based on what has happened with the Canucks forward, I think there's a good chance it might be. So we'll talk on that tomorrow. But until then, shout out to the everydayers, the occasional listeners, the first-time listeners, the new subscribers, and those of you who join us on the live show on YouTube. We appreciate you, especially as I fumble my way through life here on Locked On Canucks. Kyle, anything to say to the people before we get out of here?
Now, let us know in the comments, man. Was the Lindholm trade worth it? And was it also like top 3 biggest midseason trade in Canucks history? Because I think so. It's just a really fascinating tale of Elias Lindholm and your Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, and coming up tomorrow, will the Pod Colson trade be the most exhilarating trade in Canucks history? That's coming up tomorrow, but until then, we got to get out of here. I'm Trevor Beggs. That guy's Kyle Bowen, and you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked